A national source is officially reporting the Big 12 will join the SEC and Big 10 in a new power conference. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Monty from the Monty Show saying the Big 12 is joining the SEC and Big 10 in a bombshell realignment move where a super conference is being born as we speak. We'll also talk Arizona being fined. They should be for yelling F the Mormons at BYU students during a basketball game, and the SEC is going soft. A coach got on the microphone and begged students to not rush the floor at a game because the school is too poor to afford it. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. The Big 12 joining the SEC and Big 10.
A rumor has surfaced that maybe the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10, they're not enemies. Maybe they're about to be friends. They're going to join each other in a super league coming soon.
That is the report, and it started as a mailbag from John Wilner, who's a pretty popular reporter, who said that, hey, what would it be like in 2030 if this is to happen? But then a guy from the Monty Show, known as Monty by most, had a report yesterday. He said his sources told him that right now the SEC and the Big 10 are working on it. It's in the works to join forces in a super conference with the ACC and the Big 12 and a couple of group of 5 teams. And not only that, they're likely going to leave the NCAA for this own entity that he did not name that will be their governing body. If you've seen the video, if you've seen any of these rumors, Wilner's post was a mailbag of like, what if this could possibly happen? And immediately this Monty guy jumps on something and is like, no, I know, it's coming. Please take the tinfoil hat off. I get it. It's February. I understand. The ratings are slow. Views are slow right now. It's not football season, but everyone calm down. At this point in time, the SEC and the Big 10 are not taking BYU. They're not taking Utah. They're not taking Texas Tech. They're not even taking Clemson and Florida State today. And there's not some plan in the works to go and grab those schools because right now it's not going to be very profitable for the SEC before 2030 to add really anybody, and that is the case for the Big 10 as well. Do I think BYU or Texas Tech, as Wilner listed in his very well-written response to a mailbag question, that those schools could eventually be targets for those two conferences? Yes, of course. They might be the first ones off the board. TCU is also in there as a powerful private school in the DFW area. But these are my words, TJ, not yours. I listened to the report from the man they call Monty, and we just all need to take a big, deep breath. He kept saying substantive, which is not how you pronounce substantive, and I think that alone should give you an idea after 2 mispronunciations of substantive that the guys just we're grasping at realignment and expansion straws because it's the middle of February, and that's kind of what people do. And I've done it before myself, but to report that sources are in your ear telling you that a super league is coming in the SEC and the Big 10 are actively plotting to make it happen to assimilate the Big 12 and the ACC into their ranks, this is not real.
Yeah, I think what we tried to do last year in realignment was so, on the tip of everyone's fingers because Florida State and Clemson just filed their lawsuits. We wondered what was going to happen with them leaving or not leaving. And it was so interesting. And we felt like the ACC might fall apart any day, right? Like there was so much going on with it that we really did.
There was an article a day. And I know we ran with a lot of that, but the hypotheticals of what would it be like if Pitt joined the Big 12? That's a fascinating conversation to talk about. What would it be like if Florida State went to the Big 10? This is a lot different than that, though, to me, you know?
We tried, and what I think happened is we all got fat off of the niceties that were conference realignment talk.
Yes.
And what I think we've tried to do, and what I even tried to do back then, was, hey, this is kind of what I think happens. This is what I'm hearing happen. Some of that happened, some of it didn't, whatever. And then we would try and tell people like, hey, this is a theoretical conversation. Like I just did one with a couple of guys the other day where we drafted teams. I had one do the SEC and one do the Big 10, and I was lobbing up teams to them, and we drafted them. It was completely made up. It had no basis in reality. Right now, some of those teams might end up in those conferences, but I told people before we started it, hey guys, like, this is not real. This is completely theoretical. It is February. We have nothing else to talk about. We're going to do a draft because it's fun and it's speculative and just enjoyable content for you to be entertained by. That's what it feels like this Monty thing is, but he's reporting it as done deal. It's also the funniest to me. You can tell when people really have no clue when like a mailbag thing gets answered and then all of a sudden this bright new idea pops. Sources have now told me this thing that Wilner read a mailbag question on, this thing is happening.
Yeah,
I've just been told this thing is happening.
It's so tough to connect the two. Wilner is a guy who is in a similar region to Monty and those cats. So I get it. Just is a weird optic that the same day that Wilner posts this hypothetical mailbag where he's begging everyone to understand this is never going to happen, but someone asked me the question, so I'm answering it. That same day, reports have surfaced. Sources have corroborated, multiple sources corroborated to Monty that this is where the future of college football is going. Now, look, I get throwing things against the wall and hoping they stick. There are a ton of these random Twitter accounts who report stuff all the time. And honestly, in a way, it is our job to address those. What are the possibilities? Could it happen? Is it feasible? North Carolina was one a couple of weeks ago where it was, hey, will they leave the ACC with Florida State and Clemson? That's a very viable question. That's one that I don't mind answering and doing as a topic on a show because it is topical. This, however, to come to the table and say that I know my sources said this is going to happen. That's when it starts to get really, really dangerous. And I would implore everyone who's listening to just take it all with a grain of salt. North Carolina joining the Big Ten, North Carolina joining the SEC in 2030. That's not out of the picture. That's really, really not, with Clemson and Florida State as well. However, NC State or BYU or West Virginia being in the Big Ten in 4 years, in 5 years, that is just not something that I feel like we should all subscribe to and should at least research a little bit and see where this is coming. It just seems so odd. This was a 2-minute YouTube blurb that was posted with little to no backing, little to no explanation of how it would happen, why it would happen, who would pay for this, how these schools would get out of their conferences, how they would leave the NCAA. It left a lot of questions there. And those questions are ones that, if you're going to break news like this, have to be answered. We have to know, all right, if your sources are telling you this much major information, they're probably giving you some context. Why aren't you sharing that with us? So again, I implore people to, when it comes to expansion and realignment, don't avoid the topic. Don't avoid the videos. There are some really knowledgeable people, or at least entertaining people, who are tossing around ideas. Josh Pate did his early February realignment pipe dream, and he had BYU as an independent, and the Southwest Conference had come back, and there were all these wild things that he pitched. And I think you and I may have done a video that broke down what Pate posted, and obviously Pate broke it down. That's fun. Those are fun conversations, but to explicitly say this is what's going to happen is very hard for me to wrap my head around. And TJ, I love the Wilner mailbag. I do think BYU has the prowess. Texas Tech has the NIL. TCU has the Metro to be really great expansion candidates if that day comes. But I do not believe wholeheartedly that day is right in front of us.
Yeah, it's funny to think about how many hurdles would have to be crossed to get there. And could any one of the things happen? Could they all happen? I mean, in theory, sure, but we are not. I mean, you just have to be either willfully ignorant or just not care about reality to say that these things are definite when we don't even have the most definite things out there, like North Carolina and Florida State and Clemson and some of these other to gloss over those and say, like, here's what I'm hearing is pretty wild. And so I don't know. Again, we try to take everything with a grain of salt, but again, maybe just try and tune into things that tell you, like, hey man, this is a theoretical draft between two guys that are just, on a show, as opposed to what is actually happening tomorrow. Yeah. Did he put a timeline with it? Did he put any kind of timeline with it?
Not at all. So if it happens in 2036, I guess he was right. I guess this is you and I, TJ, foot in mouth. Far be it for us to question the man.
If I get views on a video from 2025 in 2036, I will send him a gift basket. I'll have to find Monty's address and send him a gift basket for the fact that
I don't think he's going to share his address with us. Not us. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a great way for me to make money. There's no better way to get in on the action than Prize Picks with March basketball here. Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps the game exciting. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum, more than 29 points. Anthony Davis, more than 12 rebounds. You can pick those if you want. It's Anthony Davis playing. I love how I can make my picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. When I win, my money hits my account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. Prize Picks even offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
Drake, BYU fans who have been great on the channel, both mine and yours, they're not their typical cheerful selves right now, right? Yeah. A little bit upset with some stuff going on. Arizona with some explicit chants going on. Let's talk about this a little bit. What's your take here?
Yeah, a choice 4-letter word that starts with F. That is where Arizona fans took it during a basketball game against BYU, where the Cougars upset the Wildcats on the road and avenged a loss from a couple of weeks ago. They took themselves in Provo. And when that choice 4-letter word is thrown out amongst a whole slew of BYU fans who are predominantly members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that word is thrown out with Mormon, which they don't even go by, but it's F the Mormons was the message that Arizona fans gave to them. Immediately the response from BYU, this is in football and basketball and baseball and any sport, is, hey, where did we become okay with religious discrimination? Now, look, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If someone goes out to the Jewish community, to the Baptist faith, to those who are Catholic and says, F the Catholics, what? Like imagine the uproar if that was to take place over any religious affiliation, and imagine if you were a conference like the Big 12 and you didn't address it in some form. To this point, the Big 12 has not done so. So to me, it feels like a pretty objective issue that the second we start considering one of the world's fastest growing faiths and their flagship program as legitimate, we have to consider that things like this can't just be, kids will be kids. This is what happens in rivalries. I mean, we did like the Catholics versus convicts thing, and that was a big deal. We weren't making fun of people for being Catholic. There wasn't a chant from the student section saying they hate all people who are Catholic. This is a very strong stance that thousands of students in Arizona took very publicly that was immediately viral, and the Big 12 has sat on its laurels and not said anything, not done anything about this. TJ, is somebody personally who's not a member of the LDS faith, as someone who personally does go to church, though, is a member of a faith, the last thing I would want is for my faith to be attacked publicly. And then nothing, not a statement from the school, not a statement from the conference, no one in a position of power actually taking up for what I believe in. This is a situation where, to me, the Big 12 needs to be called out. Arizona administration needs to be called out for not addressing this. It happened in football over the course of that season. It happens in pretty much every sport BYU plays, and happened in volleyball as well. And no one's done anything. It's now national enough, now viral enough. To me, the Big 12 has to step in and say, look, religious discrimination, no matter who it's against, cannot take place in this conference.
Yeah, it's so much different. You know, the immediate thing that I think about is how the SEC stepped in and said, like, or how the Big 12, said that you can't do horns down, right?
Yeah.
But it's so much different than that, right? Like, if
it's
they
worse.
were,
it's
if
worse. One of them's a university, one of them's a religion.
Right. If they were saying F the Cougars, right? Like, now I like taking my kids to games. I would hope that my university, like if Florida State was doing that to UF, right? And my kids are there, like, I'm not going to love that. And so I even get that aspect. You know, if it was F the Gators or F the Knowles or whatever, like I would even be like, oh, man, as a dad of 2 little kids. Now, if my kids aren't there, I don't really care. But there are other people's kids in all these events and stuff. So even just doing it like, but all that said, if they just said F the Cougars, like, I don't know that they would have a lot of leg to stand on, BYU specifically. Like, I don't think you could say like, hey, we're members of a faith. You can't use bad words against us. Like, I think you'd probably have to say like, hey man, just toughen up and, you know, give it back to them on the court or on the field or wherever. But to invoke the religious aspect of it, you mentioned it. Yeah. If you were to do this against some of these other religions, like, it would be a big deal. And so it's so much worse than horns down. It's so much worse than just the team mascot or whatever. And It is strange to me. Hopefully we can get this video out before the Big 12 makes us a liar. But it is strange to me that the Big 12, at least at this point, time of recording this, Monday afternoon, we haven't heard anything on like, hey guys, let's calm this down a little bit. Like we're going to start fighting and saying you can't do this. To which then other Big 12 and other programs, ADs and coaches would say like, hey guys, let's give this a rest. Let's not be, engaging in this kind of activity.
Yeah. Again, as somebody who went to Baylor University, it's a denomination, not a faith within itself, but it's a Baptist school. And for us Baptists, if you said F the Baptist or F those who are Church of Christ, even sects within, evangelical faiths, that is something that I'm sure would create massive uproar. And no fan base has ever, to my knowledge, teetered on. Very seldom do you hear these thrown out when Notre Dame is playing or when Baylor is playing or when TCU, formerly, was playing. But for BYU to have to deal with this and then not have the backing of its own conference or not the backing of the Arizona administration, it is very odd to me. And TJ, you hit the nail on the head. Horns down was such a big thing. Storming the court, 1,000 kids touching the basketball floor after their school upsets a top 10 team. That is a $25,000 fine. And if you're an athletic director, God forbid you call out the officiating in our conference because we're going to fine you $40,000. Don't show your butt. But if you've got students who are doing something this egregious against a faith, that's the point where I have to draw the line. Where for me, again, it almost feels like it doesn't matter the side of the aisle that you're on. It is objective that when we start taking people's values, their faith into consideration in college sports, you have gone too far to demean that. And that's exactly what Arizona did in the situation. It's not just yelling another chant. It is yelling something that is highly offensive to a large group of people, a growing group of people, and a very valuable school in the Big 12. Who's more valuable right now at the conference, Arizona or BYU? That answer is pretty darn simple. And I feel like we should be giving a lot of love to the Cougars from the conference level in a situation like this one.
Do you think that the Big 12 will eventually stand in and say something? Do you think this is kind of you said it happened at other times. This wasn't a one-off scenario. Do you think that they will get pressure from BYU? Do you think that they'll get pressure to eventually do something?
Well, I think someone will have to, and there was like a quasi kind of apology where Arizona tried a little bit to say, "Hey, our bad," but the anti-LDS taunt at the BYU Cougars is something that, again, I have to implore the Big 12 to respond to, because if not addressed, if there's not some sort of fine involved here or a reprimand involved here, it will continue to happen. And then at what point does the buck stop? If we get to a game in a couple months or a week where Baylor and Arizona are playing in football or basketball and it's F the Baptist, I can guarantee you that's a hard stop right there. There would be reprimand for that. Why aren't we seeing the same thing here in the situation?
Drake, the SEC, we give them a lot of crap. We give them a lot of grief at times, but are they relatively soft when it comes to the fan experience? Let's talk about it.
This is another thing. This is just, they keep doing this to us, TJ. They keep just doing stupid things publicly. When the second you think, all right, here we go, the SEC is back. They're we all have known they're the best conference in college football for the last 20 years, and that's fine. We won't argue it, but they want to shove it down our throats, and then don't you dare rush the field. Don't you dare storm the court. Don't you dare have fun being a college kid. Look, if you are at Valparaiso, I can't speak to that college experience. I can speak to my buddies who went to the University of Arkansas, who went to Ole Miss, who went to Alabama, who are at Vanderbilt. Even those nerds like to storm the dang court. And the SEC was very clear that if you do this, we are going to fine you. If you storm the field, we're going to fine you. This can't happen. The Big 12, everywhere else, you know what? Have some fun. Cash some happy checks. Be a college kid. The latest development with this from the SEC is Dennis Gates saying he told his fans at Mizzou not to storm the court because we need the money to go to NIL. What? He's like, please, we can't get fined, which NIL doesn't even run through the athletic department. Who are they making pay their court storming bill right now? Like, how do you mid-game, like, fans, please don't storm the court. We're poor. We can't afford this. Why are you the mighty SEC and your teams are begging your fans to not do the single most fun thing you can do when you're 19 years old, 20 years old, and probably inebriated? Don't do it. We're poor. You can't have both. You cannot be the apex of sport, the league that does it better than everybody else. It just means more. It just means less court storming. It just means less money, apparently. Like, why are we nickeling and diming our students who, TJ, one court storming is like $25,000. There is not a single SEC school where one student's tuition in 1 year can't cover that. There are certain SEC schools where a student's tuition from one single semester could cover $25,000. Mine at Baylor, I could have paid for 2 court stormings every single year if the Bears wanted to do it, and that was just me. But no. Don't do this, because then our athletic department can't afford NIL. And guess who doesn't even afford NIL? The athletic departments. I have so many questions for Dennis Gates. I have so many questions for the SEC. This continues to happen. They keep making stupid rules, saying they're the underdog, and just throwing up all over themselves publicly when we already know they're good at the whole sports thing.
Okay, another direction with this. I'm sure you've seen the Greg Byrne comments where he has talked about the AD at Alabama. I'll remind you before we even get into that Greg Byrne earlier was talking about, hey, we're not going to schedule tough out of conference because we're getting penalized for, playing tough schedules. Meanwhile, their losses were to Vandy and Oklahoma this year. Yeah. But 2 SEC teams. I know that, Big 12 guys will remember that Oklahoma is no longer in the conference. But Greg Byrne, again, I don't know why we continue to stick a microphone in his face to get his take on things. He thinks that the team of a team, if the fans of a team storm the court after upsetting a highly ranked opponent, they should lose that game.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Yeah, that was a really fun one, man. Again, it's every time an executive in the SEC opens their mouth and just think that's it. That's the epitome of stupid. That's the pinnacle. We've done it. We can't get any better than this. Forfeit the game because, again, likely inebriated 22-year-old college kids are standing on the court or standing on the field. I know Alabama doesn't really get this because they always are the big dog and they're never upsetting teams and winning at home against a top 5 team. We've been here before. So they're the ones that are ticked off because other schools are doing it against them. Don't lose. How about just don't lose to Vanderbilt? If you don't lose to Vanderbilt, they don't take the goalposts and throw them in the river. And guess what? Because you lost to Vanderbilt, my dad still talks about 2007, Darren McFadden, University of Arkansas Razorback, playing against LSU. And it was a massive upset against the number 1 team in the country. It took place in Little Rock, Arkansas, if I remember correctly. Maybe getting my years mixed up. But guess what happened? They stormed the field. They took the goalposts. They marched them down Markham Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. Coolest thing ever. He loves that story. He loves to talk about it because it's a great memory as a Razorback fan, and those fans don't get very many of them. And now, kill it. Kill it with fire. Don't do it. You're going to forfeit the game if you storm the field. Imagine being, a group of 100 kids that all you want to do your senior year is make a memory because you just beat the number 1, the number 5, the number 10 team in the country. And the second you step on the field, the game's nullified. The 80 players who competed in that game, they all of a sudden have to take a loss because kids wanted to do what kids do. You don't hear this from the Big 12. You don't hear this from the Mountain West. The ACC, the AAC, they're going to let students just kind of go. And the SEC claims to be this great, we're not only are we academically sound, we're also a very fun experience for students. We're the party conference. You get to come here and have a great 4 years, 5 years in most cases, and live it up in Baton Rouge or live it up in Fayetteville or live it up in College Station. And instead, they've once again embarrassed themselves because they don't want you to have any fun. If I am 17 years old and seeing that Greg Byrne is telling me if I rush the floor that Alabama, my favorite team, is going to lose the game because I did that, I'm packing my bags. I'm going to Purdue. I'm going to Northwestern. I'm going to Illinois. Send me to the cold where they actually want to have fun.
Absolutely correct. 2007, they upset LSU, number 1 in the country, 50-48. Imagine watching 98 points worth of football. And
don't you dare such a, because if you step on the field, your team loses now.
Yeah. Unranked Arkansas at that time when that game.
And LSU still wins the national championship.
Yeah. Must be nice. But yeah, it's just silly. And I don't know. People will argue player safety, and you see different things happen. And I get it, but man, to make it this big of a deal, court storming, field storming, I've never seen. I don't know. I feel like we can go on forever about this, but yeah, it just seems asinine to me. It just seems, and again, when you've got coaches getting on the loudspeaker during games to do this, you've got ADs that continue to get mics shoved in their mouth to talk about these things. I don't know. It just seems so silly to me.
It's a crazy concept. Middle of the game, the coach is like, shoot, we're too poor for this. We can't afford this. Microphone. He's like yelling at an assistant somewhere to hand him a microphone and talk to the entire crowd. But guys, please, I don't have any money. Like, these students who pay $50,000 a year, you're telling them that you don't have enough money for them to run on the floor. I can't. I know I'm kind of going in circles here, but it just baffles me that this is the world. This is how soft the world has gotten today. This is how soft everything is, because now athletes cannot be celebrated, because those are great. Those are great pictures too. Where the athletes are taking the Snapchats with the fans and they're signing stuff, and they sign some random kid's forehead. Those are so fun too. I mean, I think if you really ask the college kids, they would love this. They love a good court swarming where they jump up and down and celebrate and the floor is shaking. It's the adults in the room who seem to be who hate fun all of a sudden.
How iconic of a moment was it out in Arizona this year, where they stormed the field twice for Arizona State?
BYU fans don't like
that. Was chaotic, like with the second back on, and Kenny was screaming at the refs. But that's what we want.
Iconic
chaos. Like,
the band is on the field. The band is on the field. Baylor, I guess my junior year at Baylor, we beat Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team, and I have a buddy who loves to tell a story of giving Lincoln Riley the double bird as he ran across the field. And Baylor calls a timeout with 3 seconds to go. They have to back all the students up into like the sidelines and that extra area on the side of the field. And Baylor kicks a field goal to win by 17. Just rub it in, salt in the wound. And it was awesome. It was awesome.
Storming out of it.
You storm the field twice, but not in the SEC. You have to forfeit.
Yeah, game's over at that point. Do you forfeit it with 3 seconds left, or do you get to kick that field goal to have a 17-point forfeit? That would maybe be a good question.
I think from there, it's like drone strike. I think from there, they're just like, you know what? Tear the stadium down. All the students are fired. We're done. We're done. They cancel the athletic department.
It just means more unless you're on the court. Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they get more of your content?
Yeah, at Drake C. Toll or at Ella Big 12 on Twitter, and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.